fearfully and wonderfully made human. I'm your host, Diana S. Rice, licensed mental health counselor, holistic Christian therapist, and fellow journeyer through the valleys and victories of healing. Today's episode was born out of a real moment of connection. A couple of months ago, I met today's guests at a South Florida clinical collective networking event. We started talking about stigma in minority cultures, specifically within the Haitian community. And I thought this conversation belongs on the podcast. So here we are. Joining me today is Ostin Celestin Jr., LMHC, LMFT, EMDR-Trained, DBT-Informed, and a Qualified Supervisor. Born and raised in Miami, Florida, Ostin brings nearly 17 years of clinical experience to the table. He earned his bachelor's in psychology from Florida A&M University and his master's in mental health counseling and marriage and family therapy from Barry University. From trauma work, including complex PTSD, to substance use, chronic mental illness, and relational healing, Ostin has done it all. He now runs Insight 180 Counseling, where he works with children, adults, and families in his private practice. And just to keep things beautifully balanced, he's also a sci-fi lover who uses reading and storytelling as tools to foster creativity and connection in therapy. Today's episode is titled Breaking the Silence: Mental Health, Culture, and Healing in the Haitian Community. We're going to unpack everything from strict but loving parenting to spiritual influences, collective trauma, and how therapists can offer culturally competent care. Whether you're a therapist, a member of the Haitian community, or someone who's just trying to understand how culture and mental health intersect, this one is rich, real, and restorative. So, Austin, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Diana. Thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
So, tell us about yourself, who you are, what led you to become a therapist, and what fuels your passion for this work.
I mean, there's a funny story to what led me to become a therapist. I didn't know what to do. Yeah, that comes from background growing up. So I grew up in Miami, obviously, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
and part of that journey was obviously education, right? Education was paramount for my family, and Austin wasn't the best student, but I got to college, and my parents wanted a doctor, and so I majored in bio pre-med. And it kicked my butt. It really did.
Yeah,
It
I can imagine.
really did. It really did. Not to the sense of like D's and F's, but more like B's and C's. And
Mm-hmm.
I realized it wasn't something I was passionate for. And around sophomore year, I wanted to change my major. And I had a friend who said, well, you have all the prerequisites for psychology. You might as well just change your major to psychology. It's like, psychology, really? So this is a 21-year-old,
Yeah.
just kind of floundering at 4
What your
a.m.
parents think, Austin? Because to me, I know
Oh,
like working with
yeah.
minority cultures, like they
Hmm.
come from a different, is your parents from Haiti?
My parents are from Haiti, yeah.
Okay, so you're
Hmm.
second generation here in America. I mean, you were
First,
born
first
here.
gen. I was born here, first generation here,
Yeah,
yeah.
like me.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so I know like the pressure they came and they're working hard. Were they, uh, you know, were they working as doctors and lawyers and stuff like that here in this
No,
country?
they're blue collar, blue collar.
Yeah.
My father worked at Blue Hilton as a bartender, and my mother's a certified nursing assistant. So
Oh,
very
wow.
blue collar. We grew up in the inner city of Miami. Around eighth grade, we moved to North Miami, which is a suburb north
Mm-hmm.
of Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and upon getting to college, so to answer your question directly, they weren't happy.
No,
They
I
weren't.
know.
They
My mom still
weren't.
to I mean, I'm in my 50s and she never
Yeah.
like was she wanted me to go into like a 9 to 5,
Hmm.
40 hour, at least something with great
Hmm.
benefits but I know that other minorities it comes in it's like doctor or lawyer. You're going to be one of those
It's
because
the same.
I get it, right? I get it.
Mhm.
Like that's like the high paying prestigious kind of work.
It's what's regarded, so in our culture, in the Haitian
Hmm.
community, it is still that. I mean, till this day, I meet second and third generation Haitians to the Americas, and it's still doctor and lawyer. And so my mom, I mean, funny story, freshman year, I told my mom I was going to major in English. So you mentioned sci-fi.
Yeah.
I write stories. I write short stories, middle school, high
Oh,
school.
I love
I
that.
wanted to be a writer, and I told my mom I'm going to major in English. And freshman year, before she walked out, left me in the dorm room. She goes, "What are you going to do with the English degree? I didn't send you here to major in English." And so that kind of crushed me. And so I said, "All right, fine, mom, I'll go into biology." And so because I had the prerequisites and I took my first biology course that summer of 2000. Yeah,
Oh,
2000.
Austin,
Yeah, can you hear me?
something just happened with the hello.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, now I can hear you again.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
you cut off.
Uh, Sorry about that. So
No, no way.
I took my first psychology class. It was basically intro to psychology, summer of 2000, and I loved it. I
Yeah.
just literally fell in love with the history, fell in love with what the professors were telling me. And I just stayed there. I just stayed there. Funny enough, with that major, you need a minor. So I minored in anthropology just to like,
Really?
yeah.
That's cool.
And I always liked the study of culture and
Yeah,
the
me
study
too.
of people. And
Hmm.
so I majored in psychology. I finished off majoring in psychology, minored in anthropology. Um, it took me 2 years to tell my parents. And so it took me 2 years to tell my parents. And I
Yeah,
remember I came home for the summer for about a week,
yeah.
right before graduation. And I sat there, I said, Mom, Dad, I got something to tell you. I changed my major from biology to psychology. And my dad got up from the table, walked to his room, and slammed the door. Yeah. And my
And this
mom
is
just stood
something
there.
that I hear, like, let's talk
Hmm.
about that a little bit because now
Sure.
we're grown. Like, we're grown, we've
Hmm.
come through it, but you have a lot of young people, I bet you that you work with
Yeah.
that have that kind of fear. Like, because that's a fear. Like, even when you said that, like, it took me
Hmm.
2 years to have this conversation.
Hmm.
Can you recall back in the day how you were feeling and what was going on inside your
And
system?
everybody knew except my sister and my parents.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody knew.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I would come home for the summer, go to church, my friends in church would be like, uh-oh, what are you gonna do? I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know, bro. I don't know. There was a fear. I'll be honest with you. I mean,
Mm.
fear to the level of not anxiety, but fear.
Yeah, it's like a
Not like a
respect in a
fear.
way, right? Is it let's
Oh no, it's
describe it
worse
a
than that.
little.
It was worse than that. No, no, no. It was fear of like they're gonna cut my head off type of fear.
Yeah.
But and again, am I being dramatic? Probably. But I remember a 21-year-old
Yeah.
kid
Hmm.
just being a disappointment
Yeah.
or feeling like a disappointment and
Exactly. Yeah.
not living up to that expectation, which is a lot of pressure in the community, right? Your parents immigrate to the US, they barely speak the language, they're working to learn the language, and they are encouraging school, school, school.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so our life, and I'm an 80s baby, so our life included church, school, and home. That's it. You went to church, went to school, and you came home. And that was your life 7 days a week. And so the aspirations of your parents, so you recognize that at an early age, My
Mhm.
dad worked nights. And
Wow.
so he'd leave the house at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. As I would come home from
Yeah.
elementary school,
3 to 11,
he'll
I bet. Was it 3 to 11?
no, three to three. He worked 12s.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, he worked 12s because he
Yeah.
worked at a bar.
Oh,
And
true.
so he worked at a hotel. And so he would catch the bus, go to Miami Beach, and then work from like, let's say 3 to 3 a.m., come
Hmm.
home by 5 o'clock because he's either getting a ride or waiting for the bus to take him home,
Wow.
which the bus starts running at 5 o'clock in the morning. So sometimes
Yes.
I'm going to elementary school, my dad's coming in the house,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And my mom worked 3 to 11, so she was a nursing assistant. And so they want, they're informing you of like this is our life. I mean, I wouldn't say we were poor, but we grew up in the inner city. And
Hmm.
so two bedroom, one bath apartment. And so with 3 kids. And so yeah, you kind of, not living in the best homes. And they wanted more. And
Of
so
course.
and
That's why
so
they
that
come here, right? This
that's
is
why they come
why
here,
they come
exactly.
here for the American dream.
The American dream. Exactly. So that pressure
Yeah.
for 2 years, I just couldn't tell them.
No.
Come home for Thanksgiving. How's school? Good.
Mm. Yeah.
Come home for
Yeah.
Christmas. How's school? And like I said, when I told them, I would tell my friends, and my friends like, you gotta tell them. You gotta tell them. And these are Haitian American kids too, as well.
Okay.
So they understood the pressure. They
Right.
understood the dynamic. And I told them, and my dad didn't say a word. He got up, went to his, I was this is in the dining room, got up. I can still see it today. Got up, went to the dining room, slammed the door. Didn't say a word.
Yeah.
My mom said, we're disappointed. We're upset. Forgive your father for doing that. And she was empathetic enough, but she was also upset. And that was it. Like, kind
Well,
of,
glad you didn't get a beat down because that's what I hear at times. Let me tell you, working in the
no,
alternative school system, the beat downs are real. Like it's like,
yeah, but it was an emotional beatdown for, I mean,
yeah,
it lingered for, I was glad I told them, but it did
yeah,
linger,
yeah,
if I remember well, for like a good week. That sense of disappointment,
yeah.
that sense of like, I don't want to say shame, but guilt for sure. There was
What do you
a lot of
think?
guilt there.
Yeah, what do you think that is though? Because to me, like after working through my own system and
Hmm.
understanding, right? What do you think that, the parents, is it the lack of understanding, education, not dealing with their own traumatic influence? Because listen, a lot of the cultures that come to this country for the American
Sure.
dream, they are carrying some heavy, heavy burden and trauma. And then they
Right.
kind of pass it on to the next generation without knowing. And I'm not going to blame, it's like, how do we hold space for ourselves to
Right.
clear out that stuff so we don't pass it up, to the next generation and still have a relationship with the family unit. Like
Hmm.
how did you balance that? Like what work did you do for yourself in order to stop the stigma or stop the intergenerational stuff with you?
It wasn't, I'll be honest with you,
Hmm.
in my early 20s, it wasn't the healthiest work. It was more of a rejection in my early 20s.
Wow.
It was like, F them, in my early 20s, like you're
Hmm.
talking 22,
Yeah.
27. It's like, F them. And it was
Right.
more of an insensitive, it was more of a rebellious type
Hmm.
of nature, if I remember of that kid from 20 years ago. It was more like, this is my life. I'm gonna lead it my way.
Yeah.
But again, when I learn about family therapy, you're somewhat becoming kind of the cutoff. You're like, kind of like, I don't care, leave me alone. I'm gonna
Hmm.
do what I want to do. And so you're slowly kind of cutting off from the family.
Hmm.
You're still connected, but you're kind of cutting off. And it took me until like my late 20s, early 20s, like, whoa, what are you doing? Obviously, that's when I became a counselor. I was like, what are you doing? I was like, what are you doing? You can't do this. And
Right.
so you kind of emotionally reconnect to the family of origin.
Hmm.
But it was very difficult because I think what you see, um, my mother is the storyteller. And so you get the traumatic story. She grew up in Haiti during the 50s and she was born in 51. So she saw Duvalier, she saw all that. And so
Wow.
you get a lot of those stories as a kid because she's
Hmm.
trying to pass on the culture. And part of the culture,
Yes.
obviously, is you get the funny stories, you
Hmm.
get the lore stories, you get the Haitian Revolution stories, but you also get the, hey, I grew up suffering. I grew up hard. I grew up with no parents. I
Right.
came to this country so you can have a better life. You get
Right.
also those stories as like
Yes.
a 6-year-old. You're like, huh?
Yes, exactly. Yes,
So
exactly. You have no idea. You have
you
no
have
idea.
no
Why are
way.
you crying? You have no reason to cry. You have no
Hmm.
reason to cry. You're here in this country. You have no idea what sadness or
Right.
trauma is.
So, and then you
Wow.
get those stories. And so and then again, there were great stories too, because I think a lot of my pride comes from those stories. Because a lot of, my mother would tell us great stories of the Haitian Revolution, right? Just amazing. Like she was like, she should have been an actress because she's like role playing, she's like doing everything, and she's standing up, charge, and like she was a great storyteller. And you're like, me and my brother would get all these stories. It was our way to get out of school, by the way, because she would come on at 11 and like, let's have mommy tell us some stories. And I remember me and my brother, that was our ploy. We had our mom one night. I remember this vividly. We had her telling, she got home at 11:30. She kept us up to like 4,
Telling the stories.
telling stories, just
Have
telling
you written
stories.
them down?
No, I'm gonna record her. I want to record her. She can still remember. But again, you're like, 8 years
I
old. Now you're
know.
like,
But that's a beautiful memoir, Austin.
it
Like of
is,
your
it is.
culture of I
Mhm.
mean, listen, you have a lot to offer because it is rare, not rare. I mean, I know probably two handfuls, not even, of men of educated Haitian
Yeah,
psychotherapists,
yeah.
and that's to me like is so needed, especially nowadays. I mean, I had client after client that were Haitian males, and I learned about the culture because of them. But to me, I would have loved to say, hey, listen, here's Austin.
Mhm. And and those stories, for Haitians, obviously build resilience. They build a sense of pride, a sense of courage. You know, for us, it's like we're the first, right? And whatever's happening now, we're the first. We're the first
Mm,
successful slave revolt. So whatever you want to say about us, whatever. We're the first.
yeah.
And hearing those stories as a kid, especially in the 80s, when you would get bullied, when you would get called all types of names, uh, whatever, right? Because I had those stories in my background.
Wow.
And so when you get all that, you kind of you do feel at an early age you're standing on giants, right? Because
Sure.
again, what do you know about being black in America? I was a slave. And that's it. That's what you
Right.
get in school, that's what you get
Right.
in the media. Um, and so when you get that perspective from your parents,
Hmm.
and I think we are the most important, I have two children of myself, and we are the most important teachers to our kids. When you get that perspective, you don't feel that diminished anymore. And so that going back to our initial conversation about, that puts a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah.
That put a lot of pressure on me to succeed and to quote unquote live that American dream. And the only way you can live that American dream in America then is be a lawyer, be a doctor. And so when you say you're going to be a therapist or a psychologist, they're like, what's that? I don't know what that
Mm.
is.
How'd you
You know?
explain that? Because I know for most of
Mhm.
my career or even going to school of this, like I know because I was raised by a single immigrant mom, right? And so it
Mhm.
wasn't a very understanding, nurturing, kind of caring, like, oh, okay, no. Oh, tú
Right.
trabajas con los locos. You work with the crazy. I'm like,
Yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah.
no, mom. Like there was no empathy there, like at all. And to me, though, it was lack of education and understanding or fear. Like, wait, you're going to therapy? What did I do wrong?
Mhm.
So tell me
That's
about the
it's
stigma in your culture about the word therapy.
well, there's still a very, I mean, I think around that time, my younger brother passed away. Younger brother passed away in 2000.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry.
so, you go to school, start psychology classes, and you come home and the house is depressed, right? There's my dad, my mom, and my little sister. And the house is depressed. And you're like, Mom, I think you need to go to therapy. What's that? I'm not crazy, right? And so again, the support system becomes a church, right? The support system is naturally for our community to church, whatever the
Mm,
church may be, Protestant, Catholic, Seventh-day Adventist, that becomes a support system. And so I try to encourage her, at least go talk to a pastor, or at least go talk to brother such and such, sister such and such, because mom, you're depressed. I'm not
mm,
depressed.
mm. Yeah.
Sister, look, my little sister's depressed. She's not depressed. She's fine.
Right.
All right. And so, how do you explain it? Because it's only I'm the person that crazy people go see. Like you said, I'm the person that crazy people go see. And
Which
so,
is not true. Anyone listening, we do
no, it's
more than
not true.
that.
We know too. And so the stigma is prevalent for sure. It's still there. But
Mhm.
it's not there in just my community. It's there in a lot of marginalized and communities of color. It's
Yeah.
still there. And so how do I explain?
Hmm.
I think now there's a higher level of education. I started my career working with the community. So
Oh,
I worked a lot of community mental health for the first 5 years of my career. So
okay.
I was working with a lot of people that looked like me and you, right?
Yep.
In
Me
the
too.
inner city.
Hmm.
Um, I spoke okay Creole. I think my Creole is good to great. Some people be
So
like,
do
your
you
Creole is horrible.
understand it completely? Like if somebody was speaking Creole, you would totally
Yeah.
pick up exact. Okay, good.
Mhm.
Good to know.
I can only pick it up. I'll go pick it up. I'll go
Yeah. Do you
100% pick it
do
up.
therapy in Creole though?
I used to. Like I said, like those first 5 years was going into the homes. I was doing house visits. So it would be working with mom and dad whose language barriers were very
Yeah.
prevalent. And so I would have to go there. And funny enough, I remember one mom picked up my accent. She's like, yeah, you're from the north. Like, how'd you? So regionally, she was able to pick up my accent because both my parents are
Wow.
from the both my parents are from the north, and so
Okay.
there's certain words and certain dialectical changes in Creole. And she's like, "Yeah, you're from the north," and she was from the south. She's like, "You're from the north." I'm like, yeah, my parents
Mm,
are from the north, and so yeah, I would speak Creole. A lot of times, you're doing a lot of translations because a lot of times I work with these parents with the school, so they're speaking to the school counselor, to the
yeah.
principal, and so even then, it felt like they were getting in trouble, right? Because here's this person to work with your bad child. Maybe the bad child had ADHD. Maybe the bad child wasn't completing homework. Maybe the bad child, and again, I'm using bad because that's how the school system would
I
describe it.
know.
And
It
so,
got me so frustrated working in the
yeah,
school system. I'm like, no.
yeah, and so you become kind of the bad guy. And again, a lot of people's entryway to therapy is typically from what? Community mental health or DCF, or the
Yes.
school saying your kid needs therapy. A lot of people, especially minorities, that's kind of their first entryway.
Yes. And so they don't
And
trust,
so
they double down and then they
they
really
double
don't
down.
trust it,
They really don't trust you. And
Mhm.
so a lot of my clients were Haitian clients. And so at least speak the language, kind of break the ice, smile, talk about your family, talk about where you're from, and then kind of educate. I'm not here to get you in trouble. I'm here to help you and your family, your kid. And so that was the first 5 years of my career. And it's easier to explain it to your loved ones that that's what you do. I'm helping
Yeah.
us get
Yeah.
better. And so
Right.
mom was like, oh, okay, that's a good job. How much you get paid?
Yeah.
It's like,
Not much.
not much, mom.
Sorry, it's not the doctor and the lawyer.
No,
Actually,
mom, that's
doctors
not
and
that.
lawyers come and see us now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mhm.
Oh man. So listen, trauma runs through Haiti's history, right?
Sure.
From
Mhm.
colonialism to political instability to natural disasters. How do these collective traumas show up in therapy? And what's the path to healing, you think?
I was a clinician during the earthquake, and
Oh my God.
so
So
and
can you, like, for anyone listening now, because people forget quickly because the next news
people
thing
forget.
comes. So
Yeah,
can
that's
you
okay.
kind of, because that was
So
humongous.
2010, yeah, 2010 earthquake occurred, devastated Port-au-Prince, uh, and a lot of people were relocated. And I forget the numbers, but we're talking hundreds of thousands of people
Yeah.
were killed. I mean,
One of the biggest natural
when there
disasters
was
out there.
humanitarian crisis. You had, malaria. You had okay, a lot of stuff, a lot of bad stuff happened. The community came together. I remember, my church is a Haitian church in Miami. My old church was a Haitian church in Miami, and so clothes, donations, and so you're just like loading up. You're doing all the thing you can, and working with people that were kind of displaced. Every now and then you'll get that kid that survived the earthquake. And he only speaks Creole, and so you're speaking to him about that. And so how do you communicate to someone, that experienced such a thing? And again, it's again, remember I told you those stories that my mom told me. I mean, yeah, the Haitian Revolution. Yeah, but she had to explain what slavery was to a 5-year-old.
Right.
She had to explain why, the revolution occurred. What they would do. She was like, yeah, they would put a. She was describing quartering to me at 5 years old. Yeah, they would put a horse. They put a horse. Tie your hands here. Tie your hands here. Tie your hands in
Oh,
feet.
oh, that kind of
And then,
quartering. Oh no,
yeah.
yes. Oh yeah.
So
Oh,
again, you become indoctrinated with kind of the suffering of like, and then again, the media didn't help. And
no.
so to answer your question directly, I think as an Asian American therapist, you relate. They know the struggle. They know you're not blind to it. They know you understand it, and you can even communicate it. You even have the historical background to communicate it because, hey, my mom told me those stories. Hey, I have cousins that experienced the earthquake. I have cousins that were in Haiti during the earthquake. I have cousins that are still there. So you're able to kind of communicate that to them,
Mhm.
and I think the biggest thing is relational, to be honest with you, in that particular dynamic. It's like that's when the cultural um, commonality helps. Like being able to like speak to somebody who really understand. We work as clinicians to understand our clients
Yes.
empathically, but then of
Mhm.
course when there's a cultural or racial connection, it's a lot deeper. And I'll
Yeah.
be honest with you, I get clients, some clients come to me just because of my last name. They're like,
Really?
I think that's a Haitian last name. I'm gonna call them up. You know, are you Haitian? Yes. Okay, good. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the reasons why I called you.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
say,
not
okay,
about
cool.
being racist though, because I know some people
Mm-hmm.
are like, well, why? I can do I study EMDR, I study this, and
Mm-hmm.
that. So I don't understand. I can help them too. And I'm like, yeah, you can, but sometimes it is very like to me, I would rather I mean, like my therapist, because I go to therapy, and my
Sure.
therapist is Jamaican.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that she understands the cultural background of things and being, and it's important because like what would you say to a clinician to clinicians like saying that they're starting off because you're a qualified supervisor, so am I.
Sure.
And
Mm-hmm.
how do you help your interns become more culturally competent without making them feel guilt and shame for being white? I'm just going to say it. You know what I mean? Like how do you
I
balance
think
that?
it's a good question. It's a good question. I think being a supervisor either in a facility or in an institution or right now in private practice is to help them understand. I mean, for most of them, they grew up here anyway. So it's a good awareness of like, what are you aware of the people around you first? Your friends. Again, I'm not asking you what your friends look like, but
Right.
I'm asking you about your colleagues, about the languages you hear, about the stories you are aware of. Uh, are you really aware of there's a part of the world, 90 miles away, 60 miles away that don't look like you, that don't speak like you, that have different perspectives? And you're trying to open up young clinicians, sometimes older clinicians, to that idea that the world doesn't revolve around your Eurocentric thinking, right?
That's right.
And
Yeah.
so we have to be able to be curious. I talked about my I love history, and so I always try to get supervisees to think about, all right, what's the history of this person, and what is it based on, and what shapes it, what traumas are in it, to kind of get a deeper understanding of that individual. So cultural competency, is it easier because we're in South Florida? Not necessarily,
No, you
because
don't think
sometimes
so?
not necessarily. I think sometimes, depending on the only if like again, if you only work with a certain population, you might not be as culturally competent as you think you are.
True. Yeah, you're
Right. And
right.
so, and so, um, I'm sure when we go to our networking events, you're like, yeah, it's like, I was like, oh, no, 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 I'm the only one. And so,
Yeah. And
and
wait, it's not only that you're the only black, it's you're a black male. There's
the
not
only
many
black male,
males in
not that many
our
black male.
there's not,
Yeah.
and that I
Yeah.
love. Like when I'm like,
Hmm.
no, we need more of everybody.
Yeah. And so, I try to at least ground them in that because
Okay.
being a college, to me, qualified supervision is not just about processing the case, it's about processing your ability to do the case. And
Exactly.
so, what don't you understand about the client? What research you need to do? What questions should you ask? Let's not get so clinical in solving the problem. Let's try to understand the client for who they are. And so, to me, that's the art of therapy. I know that's a cliche term, but that's kind of the art.
I,
Let's get to know.
actually I don't think I hear that often, the art of
Oh, th-
therapy.
oh, then I stole it from a friend of mine. I stole it from a book. It's
The art
another
of
black male.
therapy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I always tell them, you learn the science. Okay? We go to school,
Yes.
we learn the science, and
Well,
and
we
we got
learned
to
that
come in.
DSM. I have to ask you because this is
Sure,
something I know that when I was I went to Nova for my master's,
sure.
and I just,
Hmm.
that diagnostical statistical manual that they said is my Bible. Did you like have pushback or questioned it a lot, going, wait, who wrote it and why is it like this? Did you have a little bit of inside of you going, is this a very ethnocentric colonialist vibe and that this is what we're having to do? Like what was your thoughts or you didn't even think that way?
So well, I did only because our professors said that. Our professor's like, this is based on Eurocentric thought. A bunch of white guys wrote this. And
Wait a
this
minute,
is,
your professor, my professors did not say that at all. So to me, it
and
was
so,
so different. Oh, so see how it is like, you were
yeah,
able to have
my,
a better open
mhm,
mind.
mhm.
Big
And plus
difference.
the school of thought, and again, I don't want to, yeah, the school of thought, white professor, white male professor, and said, all right, this is a Eurocentric thought, this won't always work to your clients, but I have to teach it to you. So boom. And so that
I
was
want
it.
I want that professor on my podcast because that I have never heard
So,
that being
yeah,
said.
and so that
Wow,
was that. And so it
that's
wasn't,
awesome.
and again, so pathologizing clients, coming out of grad school wasn't something that I was taught in my program. Now, it could have been that particular professor in that particular style, but it wasn't. We learned the DSM, but pathologizing in a postmodern sense wasn't something. It was all about this client's story. It was all about,
Wait a minute. That's because
yes,
you're LMFT.
yes.
Was it an LM? Oh, because maybe that's the. Sorry, Austin. I got excited there. That might be
Mhm.
the difference because I was LMHC only. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so that
Yeah.
could be. So can I ask you about that? I know this is how
Sure,
my
sure.
brain
Please,
rolls.
please.
It goes woo
Yeah.
woo.
Mhm.
The LMHC, LMFT. Did you ever see the?
There's a big, I mean, how I had to conceptualize it,
Yeah.
it's I I wish I prefer looking at myself as an LMFT because I look at the whole picture. And sometimes the whole picture isn't a pathology. The whole picture is the whole picture. So the bird's eye view of not
Mm,
just this client, but their family and where their family comes from. So my historical background, not historian, but I love history. That's part of their story. And
yeah.
so that doesn't really include a lot of like, yeah, all right, your uncle was schizophrenic, whatever. What's going on with you? I
Mm,
know that might play a role genetically and maybe systemically, but like, what's going on with you? And so I get the bigger picture being a marriage and family therapist.
hmm.
Um, a lot of my early interventions, I always used to do a genogram, even if it was
Yeah.
individual therapy. I was like, yeah, do a genogram. What's that? Like, just for me.
Explain to
Just
the audience what a genogram is because remember we're
absolutely.
teaching here.
Yes, we're teaching it. And so think of it as a family tree. Think of it as a family tree. It's a system, it's an intervention. I call it an intervention for me, where we're getting the family of origin. So where our clients come from. We use squares and shapes and lines, right? Squares, circles, and lines. But I typically go back on a family tree looking at patterns. So that's the most important thing for me.
Mm,
Patterns of communication, patterns of health, career, So I've done genograms where every male was a lawyer in this
wow.
family. And so what happens when my client decided not to become a lawyer, wanted to be an artist? So you get all that transgenerational anxiety and stress.
Hmm.
It's like, yeah, every person in my family was a doctor. Every person in my family, every woman was a nurse. Everybody's had a successful marriage. Now I'm going through divorce. Or everybody got divorced in my family. Now I'm getting a divorce. I'm just falling in line.
Mm,
And so a genogram, a good genogram will show you that depending on how much work you do with the
yeah.
client and how far you go in their memory, a good
Hmm.
genogram will see patterns. And
And
so,
how's that help? Like the client itself, like do you break cycles with that? Do you just now, oh, okay, this is how we're going to shift and change and reframe?
so my first job, I got my maintenance guy to put in a big whiteboard. It's like, oh, and so I have like this, imagine this
Yeah.
5 foot whiteboard, right?
Hmm.
Getting put up and you're like, I'm the only therapist on a big whiteboard, right? And I'm just drawing it out for the client, typically
Hmm.
first or second session. And what you get is the aha moment. Like I never saw, and they start connecting the dots.
Hmm.
And for us, and at least for me, I'm looking at anxiety, right? And,
Hmm.
and anxiety is a general term. And they're connecting the dots and they're seeing those patterns of communication. They're seeing how they're continuing the patterns of communication. And again, yes, there are some things that can be traced. Like if there's mental illness, anxiety, depression, substance abuse,
Yeah.
then they're like, oh yeah, my granddad was an alcoholic. My dad's an alcoholic. Oh, damn, I'm an alcoholic. Right. And so
Right.
you get that kind of like that connection.
Yeah.
And that does help break sometimes a stigma, right? That can
Mm,
help break the stigma. That
right.
can help gain a lot of insight
Yeah.
because it's not insight to blame
Right.
previous generations. It's just insight to at least understand where you come from. And
Hmm.
again, if there's enough time, we're going to go into those historical, cultural backgrounds. And so with minority clients, we're going to talk about, okay, when did your parents immigrate to the States? All right, let's talk about that. And
Yeah.
can you tell me about the pressures you experienced being first generation American? Can you talk about the traumas associated with your culture, not just Caribbean culture, European culture, South American culture? Can you tell me about what it was, in South Florida, Portuguese, South American, so
You have
we all have
everything
our
here.
story. Yeah, we all
Yes.
have our stories. And
Yes, we
so,
do.
working with a Portuguese client right now, it's like, the genogram is just to look at how his grandfather and father treated him. And so it's like
Hmm.
understanding those dynamics. So,
Yeah.
systemically, at least for my program, we really emphasized on the story, on looking at people past their diagnoses,
Hmm.
um, just using the diagnosis as a tool. I'm not saying we should ignore diagnoses, of course we
No.
should, but looking at it as a tool to at least help them understand
Yeah, it's
what's
like a
going on with them.
boundary. I try to
Mhm.
tell the clients that you're not like, okay, you have to have, well, if you have insurance and you're taking insurance, of course you have to have a diagnosis. But I
Sure.
want, it's not, because sometimes that's not dangerous, but it depends on the person and they get a diagnosis and it's kind of like the nocebo effect that doctors will say, you got cancer or whatever, like, and now you feel this and then something
Mhm.
happens inside your genes and then now you
You
feel
internalize it.
doomed. Yeah. And then
Mhm.
boom. So what other modalities do you use with your clients, Austin?
Primarily now I'm a EMDR therapist. I've been using EMDR close to 10 years now. I got trained in DBT about 7 years ago. And so a lot of emotional regulation skills, distress tolerance skills. I use a lot of mindfulness, believe it or not, in my practice, trying to get
Hmm.
people to just be centered with themselves, grounded
Right.
with themselves. I still love my couples, so I'm trained in Gottman,
Yeah.
level 2.
So let's
Uh,
explain a little bit of all these,
sure.
just because like we're talking therapies, you know what I
Jargon.
mean?
Yeah, we're talking the
Yeah.
jargon. We're talking the
And
jargon
so
for
to me,
sure.
like if someone's listening, like to say like someone that's 22 years old, 23, they're looking for a Haitian male therapist, and then all of a
Hmm.
sudden they're like DBT. I mean, I know everybody can research and do Google
Right, right, right,
University,
right.
but to me, like to have a therapist actually explain these different modalities and what they do for you is
Hmm.
beneficial. So, like, let's start with EMDR. I
Hmm.
know I've had quite a few EMDR specialists here, but go ahead and explain just a little how you use it and like,
Oh,
you know,
sure, absolutely.
and
So
what it
I gotta get the
is.
absolutely eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So EMDR, it's a trauma resolution therapy, right? It's I use it to help go through the harsh memories, the harsh traumatic incidences. The way I utilize it is I try to help the client first ground themselves with safe place, with containment exercises to at least try to get them stable.
Hmm.
And then what we do is I typically do a trauma timeline. I think most therapists, most EMDR therapists do a trauma
Yeah.
timeline.
Like the
And to
10 most
get,
things you remember. I know that's how my EMDR specialist did for me.
mhm, right.
So,
I go a little bit longer, right?
wow.
Yeah, the way I do it, I give them the time. I give
Okay.
them the time to like from 0 to 50, from 0 to 35, like just whatever you consider traumatic. And then
Hmm.
from there, we'll pick the 10 most.
Okay.
And then we'll use bilateral stimulation. And what that is the left and right, move your
Which one do
eyes
you
or
use? Do you use the light? Do you use the hand? Do you use both? Or do you are online? You just have a thing going back and forth?
I have access to all of them. Most 90% of the clients I work with I
Mhm.
use the light bar. I used to use
Okay.
my arm a lot, but then
Hmm.
the
You get
shoulder
tired.
starts to hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get tired. And so I invested into a light bar. I typically see resolution from 3 to 5 sessions.
I love
And
that.
typically I see resolution 3 to 5 sessions. And we use what's called the SUD score, subjective units of disturbance, basically how intense or
Hmm.
disturbing
Yeah.
that particular incident we're processing. And then again, I work anywhere from substance abuse, trauma, sexual assault, um, earthquake, natural disasters. I once had a client, he said, I experienced the worst tornado in American history. Like, okay, sure. Went to Google, like, whoa, the worst tornado in American history.
Wow.
And he survived this tornado in a gymnasiums, and his entire town was leveled.
Oh
Uh,
man.
and so, I picked up EMDR as a modality to, to be honest with you, to protect myself, right? I started when I was working with children, the last 2 years I worked with children. You're interested in trauma, right? Here you go. And like, oh, okay,
Oh,
cool. And so you're listening to
yeah.
molestation,
Yeah.
abuse.
Oh yeah.
You're listening to a lot of those trauma stories. And I felt I always needed a modality to help hasten
Yeah.
the work, but
Right.
also sometimes to kind of put a barrier
Hmm.
between myself and that work,
Especially
you
after you
know?
had children, I bet. Like that
Absolutely.
that shifted
Absolutely.
I mean, no, I mean,
Absolutely.
I had children starting, but it was just like, yeah,
Yeah.
there was so much you can.
Yeah.
Vicarious trauma is a real thing for us therapists and compassion
Hmm.
fatigue. And I think a lot of
Absolutely.
people don't understand, like, we hold space for others, and it's okay because that is our job. That's the service we
That's our
provide.
job. That's our job. I tell my clients I'm your garbage man. I am your garbage man. Dump it all here. I'll pick it up, bag it up, throw it out in a
Yeah.
dumpster.
Yeah.
But I still have to pick it up, bag it up, throw it out in a dumpster. And you're gonna experience it. You're gonna experience some of that.
Hmm.
And yeah, I've had some really tough cases with children.
Yeah.
And I recognize, okay, I need to research something that can make this job a little bit more effective with trauma. And and if it does give me some of a buffer,
Yeah.
excellent, right? Because you can
Yeah.
only process so much.
Right.
DBT is dialectical. Oh, I'm sorry, you had a
Yeah.
question.
No, no,
Yeah.
that's what I was going to go next to DBT.
So DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy,
Hmm.
Marshall Linehan's therapy. It's obviously famous working with borderline personality disorder.
Hmm.
I use it in conjunction with trauma to help my clients ground, to give my
Yeah.
clients it basically the quickest way I can describe it. I'm giving you tools on how to regulate your emotions, how to interact better with your peers, your family.
Right.
Um, and so DBT, for me, yes, I will work with clients that have traditional borderline personality disorder, but a lot of us can benefit from dialectical behavioral therapy. A lot of us can benefit
Yeah.
from those skills, mindfulness every session. Uh, at least I start every session with a mindfulness exercise, like
Yeah.
do some
Yeah.
10 deep breathing
Yeah.
before I
Me
start
too.
it,
Right here. Look.
Yeah.
Right here. Let's go. We're going to take this and while I sit there with my voice and take that deep
Mhm.
breath in. Yeah, you
Mhm.
have to, because so many people come into the session with the whole week's worth of stuff, and we have to
Mhm.
help them get grounded. This is their time to chill.
Woosah. Yes, help them ground
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
Woosah.
So I want to go
Um,
into the spiritual aspect of things
sure.
real, like because to me, you know, it, I've come across many that it's Christian, like you named earlier, like the different denominations, Seventh-day Adventist, Baptist, whatever it is. Or I've had a few when I was working in alternative schools, where it is voodoo.
Hmm.
And so they would, and the kids, the teenagers weren't like they're being raised with grandma who's believing that. And but then the angst and the thing of them going, oh my gosh, the devil, now I'm schizophrenic or whatever, and it's Satan. How do you deal with that, Austin? Like, how do you deal with the spiritual aspect of the culture? And it's not
I
only your
think
culture, it's Caribbean too.
it's
Like,
Caribbean culture. You have to reconcile it with yourself first, right? So, and I grew up Judeo-Christian. I am a Christian, but acknowledging that this is part of our culture,
Hmm.
acknowledging the Haitian Revolution started with a voodoo ceremony, right? So you got to remember that, right? You have to acknowledge that. And so you have to reconcile that bias with
Hmm.
yourself first. If you're a Haitian-American therapist, even if you're, and again, I'm sure there's customs, your parents' beliefs, your parents do that come from that cultural background. You know, I'm sure when you go to the Catholic churches, there might be stuff you see, things you experience. And so you have to first, I think, reconcile that for yourself
Yeah.
first. Um, Address the stigma, right? Address the stigma present, So for instance, there's a client whose closest relative or worships voodoo, and how do I have a relationship with that individual?
Hmm.
Being I'm very Christian, and that's a very difficult type of conversation, right? It's a very difficult conversation. That particular individual, we just processed it, processed the stigma, processed, how to, and again, spirituality, right? Keep yourself safe, ground yourself in your beliefs, ground yourself in your spirituality, ground yourself in your God in order to kind of get past the relationship or the lack thereof of the relationship with the individual. I've never specifically worked with anyone that said they solely practice voodoo. Um,
Wow.
yeah, right. Never specifically worked with someone that said, "Hey, I only practice voodoo." But I'm sure I've gotten referrals. And interesting enough, I got a referral that just never came through,
Hmm.
right?
What
And
if
even
if you,
in,
I'm
go
sorry, but
ahead.
this is the quite like what if you had say an 18-year-old, and this is why I'm bringing this up because this actually happened where
Sure.
two students, they were being raised by the older sister in their 20s, and it was two
Okay.
students like in their teens working,
Hmm.
and but they just came from Haiti, and grandma
Hmm.
and mom were into the voodoo, still in
Okay.
Haiti. But so they were the anxiety that these young girls had because grandma said, "You're not behaving, so we're going to put a spell on you." And of course, if you're raised thinking this is really happening, and so now here I am going, "Oh my goodness," and I'm talking to the principal and going, what do we do with this situation? Because what do you do? Call DCF? Like, but
No.
because, right? Like, it's like, but to me, that was kind of religious abuse that was happening to, and they could not
Hmm.
function because of the situation and this poor 20 something. So stuff like this really happens, people. Like, so
Yeah, no, absolutely.
how do you help
Absolutely.
your clients if they're coming in with maybe they don't believe in this religion, but they were raised in that kind of, high control, you know what I mean, or
Hmm.
whatever, that
Hmm.
belief with fear. I mean, because that's a scary thing when people don't understand things. Excuse
Hmm.
me. Because my grandma, like I was raised with Santeria.
Right.
So it's kind of like the same,
Similar.
My
Yeah.
Puerto Rican grandma, but there was no
Hmm.
chickens being, with blood. I
Hmm.
never saw any of that. But still, you're raised in that. You're like, oh my goodness, and the anxiety of that. How would you
Well,
process that?
I think, again, like I said, reconciling it for myself first.
Hmm.
And again, this is just my own understanding, is trying to look at any religion as balance. There's going to be good, there's going to be evil in any religion, right? And I try to show that balance. Even our religion, Christianity, Christians did some bad
Yeah, it's
things.
the humans that did those things. It's the
It's a
humans.
human.
Let's not forget because there's so much deconstruction out there, and there's so many people
Right.
like you say you're a Christian, and right on, when they don't understand it. But you're right. It's understanding your.
And so it's understanding. So once you reconcile it with yourself, and then somewhat educating them, I would probably sit like this. I would probably sit with them, help them communicate the anxiety. And then again, if they need the support to counteract, so to speak, what grandma and mom are doing back in Haiti, then what does that support look like? And so if it
Mhm.
is a religious institution, if it is prayer, then again, again, you're kind of battling the culture, so to speak, and try to
Yeah.
like, and again, that's a very dicey predicament in that particular case. It must have been a very tough case because
Oh yeah.
I then have to kind of figure out, okay, what do they now want to believe? What do they now want to worship? What do they now want to have, give their spiritual energy towards,
Yeah.
right? And if it says, and if they go, yeah, yeah, okay, I don't want this curse to affect me. Then again, now I might have to go into the local spiritual leaders in the community and kind of bridge that gap there, right?
Yeah.
Because I have to be a clinician, so I have
Right.
to still be a clinician, and part of my job, I guess the support work that we do or the social work that we do, let's use that term, is like trying to connect them to the community resources that are there to kind of help counterbalance. And again, now a lot of it's going to be a lot of psychoeducation with the school staff, a lot of psychoeducation with the caretaker. Listen, you said an older sister, how to keep them safe. And again, boundaries, 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 right?
Yes.
And again, if we're looking at this as religious trauma, then again, we got to really establish boundaries.
Hmm.
Again, we're going to have to say, all right, sister, maybe they shouldn't be talking with these individuals if this is what they believe, and it's scaring them.
Right.
Um,
But it's also
it's
their
complicated.
culture, though. See, it is a complicated kind of situation because that's, you're trying to keep them safe,
Hmm.
and at the same time, like this is part of their culture, and and we don't want to disrespect the culture. Yeah, like that's
It's a it's a it's a part of the religion, especially in the Caribbean, that we haven't really reconciled. Like we can't, you know, we live in this either or instead of this both and world, right? And so
mm,
I think it's this is either good or bad. And
right.
so if what I do is good, then this has to be bad.
Mm,
And again, it's just trying to reconcile that. And I know a lot of people are like, what is Austin talking about? Reconciliation doesn't mean I worship both. It doesn't have to mean that.
exactly.
It doesn't mean that doesn't that's not what I'm saying here.
Mm,
And understanding doesn't mean I have to go worship that either. Doesn't mean that as well. But it is understanding how it's important to our culture, how it's important to our customs. Both aspects of spirituality, Christianity, voodoo is very important to some aspect of our culture. And we
yeah.
just have to really recognize that and reconcile that with ourselves. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean we're going to go worship this or worship that. I'm not
Right.
saying one is better over the other, even though we're trained to believe that, right? We're trained, and we can have another conversation about why we're trained to believe that.
Mm,
But it's still very interesting to help, like this particular client, help him at least reconcile the client I worked with, help him reconcile. All right, your sister worships voodoo. Okay, cool. All right, what does that mean
yeah.
to you?
Yeah.
What does that
Right.
mean to you? And how do you balance that with your own Christian beliefs and
It
having a relationship?
Right.
Listen to.
It's empowering the individual. That's like
Hmm.
how I see our job as clinicians. It is not to give advice. It is not
Hmm.
to tell them what's right or wrong. It is about us empowering them, to me, to understand who they are in this world so they can live a healthy, happy, and sometimes holy life, like where it's
Absolutely.
like, right? And we're the ones we're just vessels with tools that we pass along, and it's up to the client to pick up the tools and utilize them. Like you can be,
Absolutely.
you have EMDR, DBT, all these mindfulness, all these things that we can, we train ourselves to in order to become the best clinician out there. The art of
Hmm.
therapy. I love that. The
Hmm.
art of therapy. So, is there any resources that or books or anything like that that you can leave the listener with to maybe encourage them or to, especially for the Haitian culture or anything like that before we start saying goodbye?
Yeah, I think Viktor Frankl's Search for Meaning is always a good book, right?
Man's
I
Search for
would say it's a
Meaning.
good book. Yeah, Man's
Yes.
Search for Meaning. For me, my own journey has included therapy, right? Has included therapy to at least process my also you've never been in therapy. Yes, I have. I've been in therapy.
I'm still
And
going.
so obviously the complete mind, body, spirit, right? Mind, body, spirit. So check in with yourself. What's your mind telling you? What's your body telling you? What's your spirit telling you? And how do you work on that? What do you need to do? Doesn't necessarily mean you need to read the Bible every day or the Torah or the Quran, but read something to uplift you spiritually. what you put in is going to be what you put out. So let's be
That's right.
mindful of what we're absorbing, especially in the community and the culture we live in now with social media, everything. We have access to everything in these things we call telephones. And so, how are we guarding our eyes against some of those things? Exercise, obviously, to keep your body well. I think for my community, what you put in as far as food, and so keeping ourselves healthy. You know, I lost a lot of family members during COVID, and so it was, again, at risk, right? Diabetes, high blood pressure, you know, and so, when COVID came, yeah, the scariest thing that happened to me was when my mom caught COVID. I was like, oh
Mm.
shit,
Yeah.
and then you caught it again.
Oh,
And so,
wow.
but again, she took care of her. She's taking care of herself, so she wasn't at risk. And so for me, it is, I do think part of it though is, at least I try to find when I'm working with a client long enough
Mm.
and the distress is gone. Their couple's doing well, the individual's doing well, they're managed. Like, all right, let's start having that purpose conversation, you know, like
Yeah.
what are you here for? It's not
Hmm.
just to go to work, come home, make money. It's like, okay, what's that calling? What's the self-actualization look like for you? Like what's self-actualization? Well, all right, Maslow said this,
Yeah,
but like
Maslow's
like
hierarchy. And it's actually
hierarchy
teaching
needs.
like psychology
Hmm.
101 to people, psychoeducation, like because they
Hmm.
don't know. They never received that information like we did
Yeah.
that helped us to become better communicators. See,
Yeah.
therapy is not just I mean, most of the people, especially in community mental health, we saw right away were it was crisis intervention,
Crisis. Yep,
right? This is
absolutely.
why people go to therapy. I'm having a crisis. So if we were able to break the stigma in our cultures, in our world, and understand that it isn't just about mental illness, but it is about learning how to have mental wellness, because guess what? We're being attacked all over. It's not just the
Sure.
mind, it's brain
Hmm.
health. It's right. It's like what the air we're breathing. Like, how are you
Hmm.
using your five senses? That's what I'm hearing Austin say is like, how are you utilizing your five senses? And we have a choice on how to utilize it. What do you put
Absolutely.
right into our eyes, into our ears, into our mouth? Where are we going?
Hmm.
What are we choosing to do? And being mindful means to just take a moment and pause.
Yeah. And what type of human you want to be, right? And
Yeah.
trying to, and again, those are the conversations, and again, I have clients, I've been seeing for months. I have a couple of clients I've been seeing for years, and like,
Me
okay,
too.
what type of human
Yeah.
are you want to be? Because you're dealing with all this baggage, this narrative of your life, and now you have to kind of rewrite that narrative. And so
Hmm.
part of my job, no matter all the techniques, all the education, is like, let's rewrite the narrative. Let's
Hmm.
try to rewrite your story.
Yeah.
I always say you can live to 100 years, right? You're 30 years old, so you got 70 more chapters to write,
I love
right?
that.
What do you want those 70 chapters to look like? And so
Yeah.
we're rewriting the narrative, so to speak. And that's for clients with thought disorders, to substance abuse, to trauma, marriages failing, kids
Hmm.
going into college, kids who are Haitian American and they graduated an engineering degree and mom and dad are upset with them. It's like we're just gonna have to
I'm just
rewrite
quitting
the
college
story.
and I'm going to go to New York and be an actress.
Yeah, absolutely. Those conversations too. I've had those
Oh, I
conversations too.
know, right?
It's like,
Gosh.
yeah, it's like you ultimately though, I think at the end, especially for my community,
Hmm.
it's like you have to be the author of your story. And once you accept that mom and dad made the sacrifice and that was their story.
Yeah,
And their story is influential in your story, but it shouldn't author your story, right?
exactly.
It should influence it. And so yeah, mom and dad wants a doctor, but you don't want to be a doctor. You don't want to be a lawyer. I would be a horrible lawyer. I'm extremely
Love it.
introverted.
Uh,
I'm extremely introverted. So speaking in front of a jury or a crowd of people, or like, no, can't do that. And so, you have to re-author your story. You have to author it yourself. And so if it
yeah.
starts off with the choices you make, yes, you have to communicate that effectively with compassion, with some
Mhm.
boundaries, but
Yes,
uh,
boundaries is important because that's the collective culture of like,
mm,
we feel, and we could keep going on and on and on of the differences
mhm.
and what we've helped others do. And so, but I know that you have work, I have work, and we have to say goodbye. So before we say goodbye, where can someone find you if they want to work with you?
A good question. It's a really good question. I think we're Insight 180 Counseling at Gmail is my email address.
Okay.
Insight 180 Counseling at gmail.com. Uh,
Hmm.
Insight 180therapy.com is my website.
Okay.
You can Google me, you'll find me.
Yeah.
Eh,
So you see clients in person and online, correct?
mhm,
And where
mhm.
is your in-person office?
In-person office is in Boca Raton.
Okay. I'll have all that
Boca
in the show
Raton.
notes. So
Yeah,
in case anybody wants to work or just contact you for speaking or whatever. I mean, I'm sure even
absolutely.
though you don't want to be in front of a crowd, you have something to share to help
I've
others learn. So,
I've learned how to like keep my hands dry, keep their armpits dry. You got your techniques. But yeah,
yeah.
I think online works. I mean, believe it or not, the reason I was thinking about it, I was telling some of my colleagues, why do I have four international clients, right? Because the power of the internet, right? Power of the internet. I have clients all over the world, believe it or not. And so it's like, yeah, and so I
That's
think
because he's coaching.
yes, that's
That's
because I'm coaching.
because Austin is coaching.
That's because
Okay.
I'm coaching, right? But
International clients are coaching.
yeah. And so it's the internet will and it just marvels me, that people like I didn't know
Yeah.
you existed. And I
Hmm.
get and the sad part of I know you said this like we can close like when clients say that you're a black male Haitian therapist, you're a unicorn, you know? Like,
Actually, there's there's a I interviewed another
mm-hmm,
young, well, I don't know if he's younger than me. So yeah, young man, male therapist, Markin. And I would
mm-hmm.
love, maybe in the future, would love to just do something for each culture, like say a Haitian American, and then have a panel where I moderate the panel and we just talk about that. And then maybe a Portuguese
Sure.
Brazilian. And then that's my
Mm-hmm.
dream. I kind of did it at the church that I used to go to.
Okay.
And I loved it because that's just something that God put in my heart. Like we need to break stigma, not only in minorities, but in also in churches, and that to make
Absolutely.
people
Yeah.
understand, like just because a lot of people are like, well, depression, they have no reason to be depressed, and then it's like, oh, that means you're not praying enough, and don't have enough faith, or oh, Satan's got them, and I'm like, oh my goodness, no, there's really people with brain illness. Like
Yeah.
it could be that their testosterone level is low. And have you checked that? Instead of making these
Mm-hmm.
assumptions that the 19-year-old boy, maybe he's a sex addict and he's been, and that's why he's depressed because now he's not a normal,
And
19-year
think
old.
about it.
There's so many different reasons for people to
But
have.
that's been the story, right? That's been the story
Yes.
for 2,000 years, right? That's
Oh
that's
man.
so we can talk about this all day, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's why we burn
Wow.
witches at the stake.
Oh
Like
my.
because so we
My
can we
husband
can
says
go
that,
there.
Diana, like if you were back then, you'd be burned at the stake. I'm like, I'm not a witch. But he
Yeah.
goes, but you think differently, you question things. And when you think differently and you question things and you're trying to help people see things in a different light, the majority of people don't, they like the status quo. They like
Yeah,
people
just status
fighting,
quo.
fighting amongst each other.
Mhm.
They like people being blinded by things. Like,
Mhm. Yeah, I can only understand the world in one way, and that's my way. And
mm,
if enough people speak that one way or believe that one way,
mhm.
then when we're, standard deviations away from that way, it gets questioned. And
Yeah.
if I come with answers and you question those answers or you question my questions and you reject, we're living in that right now, right? Where you're
Yes.
rejecting other schools of thought, you're rejecting other areas of thought because we can only see the world in my way.
Right.
You just have to deal with the anxiety, advocate for yourself, advocate for your community,
And
keep your
pray
fingers crossed,
and
and
pray.
prayer
Let
is
me
very
tell you,
powerful.
pray,
Mhm.
that's what I do. I mean, in between client session before I came on with you. This is
Hmm.
what keeps me sane and off drugs.
Right.
It's prayer.
Prayer is very powerful. Very, very
Yes.
powerful. Whatever the higher power is, it's like God, Allah, the universe, Mother Nature, whatever it is, it's still very powerful.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I pray in Jesus' name. So, on that note, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I hope to see you at the next
Absolutely.
networking meeting. Okay. All right,
Absolutely.
listener. Thank you so much for hanging in there with us, and don't forget to trust in the Lord, guard your heart, and renew your mind. Bye. And now for the disclaimer to make sure you understand that you are responsible for you. The content provided on the Holistic Counselor podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical or mental condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The views expressed on this podcast are my personal opinions and do not represent the views of any professional organizations with which I am affiliated. Call your doctor, 911, or 988 immediately if you have a medical emergency. The Holistic Counselor podcast does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the podcast. Reliance on any information provided by the Holistic Counselor podcast, guests appearing on the podcast at the invitation of the Holistic Counselor podcast, or other listeners to the podcast is solely at your own risk. Confidentiality notice. If you engage with the Holistic Counselor podcast by commenting or posting and are a client, please be aware that you may be revealing information that could compromise your confidentiality. Please remember that disclosing your identity or personal details can be linked to your clinical material. As a therapist, I am bound by confidentiality and will not respond to any disclosures of this type on this podcast. I am committed to upholding the ethics and confidentiality of the therapeutic relationship, which extends to all forms of communication in accordance with the laws and professional guidelines that govern mental health professionals. I want you to know that your privacy is of utmost importance, and you are responsible for protecting it when interacting on this platform or any other public forum. Thank you.